In this video, we're going to show you how to install valve cover gaskets on your Nissan Frontier, located on either side of the engine. With the hood open, we're going to use a 10mm wrench to loosen this nut and disconnect the ground terminal off of our battery. Go ahead and wiggle that off and just tuck that aside. We're going to use our flathead screwdriver. Loosen the hose clamp here. And we're going to follow this over to the throttle body. Let's go ahead and loosen this one here as well. Now if we follow this over just to the driver's side back portion, there is a hose clamp. We're going to use a pair of pliers. Move that hose clamp back. I'm going to go ahead and twist that hose gently. Just break it free and pull that off. On the center right here, we have the engine upper cover or plenum. There's two 10mm bolts. Use a socket. Loosen. Once those are loose, you should be able to grab that. There's a rubber grommet on the driver's side piece right here. So just pull that off and set it aside. Remove the two 10mm bolts here. With those removed, gently grab this here, lift it up. And we're going to work this off of our throttle body. Follow it across to the air box. Pull that off. Remove that and set it aside. On the side of our throttle body, we have the electrical connector. I'm going to pinch the tab here and we're going to pull that connector off. If you need to, you can use a small screwdriver, push in on this tab and just gently work that connector. Pop that connector off and just pull that back a little bit. On the bottom of our throttle body, we have two coolant ports right here. We're going to use our pliers. Slide these clamps back. Gently twist the hoses and pull those off. Now, we may lose a little bit of coolant from here. You can put a catch can or a bucket underneath. On the top right here, we have another hose running across. Go ahead and slide that clamp up. Want to be careful when removing these hoses because this is plastic underneath here. You just want to gently grab that hose and just twist it just to break the hose free. If you have a pair of hose pliers like this, it's going to work out best. Okay, grab that, twist that, and we want to pull this off. Now there's a connector right here. There's a little push tab on there. You can try pinching that tab and pulling this off, or you can use a pair of pliers and gently squeeze, and you can hear it unclick and pull that off. Using a 12mm socket, loosen this bracket bolt. Just going to set that aside. I'm going to put that bolt right back in there. Now on the back side of the intake manifold, there is this big wire harness right here, and there are the plastic connectors. Just use a pair of pliers, pinch the little tabs here together, and push that through. We're going to do that on the other side here as well. Underneath the throttle body and a little bit further back, you're going to find a 12mm bolt anchoring the intake to a bracket. Got to remove that bolt and set that aside. Now right behind that forward bolt on this bracket underneath our intake, there's another 12mm bolt right here. I'm going to use our gear wrench on that. You could probably get a ratchet in there. On the passenger side rear of the intake, there is a vacuum hose right here. Move that hose clamp back. Be careful with this port here. It is plastic as well. We don't want to break that off. So use your hose pliers. Gently squeeze that and twist it. Pull it while you're twisting this back. Do not bend it. Now this wiring harness here attaches to a metal bracket. You can use a small pocket screwdriver. You're going to insert it into this little square opening and open up the little tab that is in there, unlocking it, and then grab the harness and pull this up. Okay, that'll loosen the harness. Now the vacuum port that we had removed earlier, you can see it is clipped into the back side of the intake. Just grab that hose and pull that out, like so. Now the wiring harness is held onto this bracket on the back of the intake. I'm going to use a flathead screwdriver and just push in on the little retaining tab. Come around the other side. I want to separate that from that bracket. So it's just a tab on either side here. And once you push in on those two little spring-loaded tabs, this will pop right out. There we go. Now that harness is completely separated from the intake. On the back side of the intake, we have a metal bracket, and it's held on by a couple 10mm bolts. I want to go ahead and loosen and remove these. Be careful not to drop those bolts. Just trying to move that bracket back a little bit. Loosen and remove the 10mm bolt here. That off and just kind of tuck that off. I'm going to put that bolt right back in there. Now running down our intake manifold, we have a series of 10mm bolts. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7. I'm using hand tools here, no power. Just want to make sure we can break everything free first. I'm going to pull these rear bolts here first. There really is no particular pattern on what you pull out first, and just my choice to go ahead and pull these two inner ones here, and then we'll just go around the front and pull those. Now there are two studs here. There's one here and one here with nuts on them. Sometimes the nut comes right off, or the nut might come out with the stud. Go ahead and set these aside. Continue along, popping these out. Now that we have our intake bolts and nuts loose and removed, let's see if we lift up on the intake here. Now when doing this here, you want to be careful not to drop anything underneath the intake and into the engine. With the intake pulled off to the side, you can see that there's one last vacuum hose on the back side. Simple enough. Go ahead and use your pliers, move that hose clamp down, give that hose just a little twist, and then work that off. Now that we have that hose off, grab that intake, carefully lift that up and remove it from the vehicle. Before you go any further, be sure to put something inside the intake holes. You can use a good sized towel or shop rags. This is to prevent anything from falling down inside the engine while we service. On this side here, we have 3 ignition coils, 1, 2, 3. We had to remove the intake to get to these units. Now I want to go ahead and remove a coil. So we're going to start by disconnecting the electrical connector here. There's a little pinch tab on there, and if you have limited amount of space as we do, you can use a pair of pliers to go ahead and reach down there, gently pinch the locking tab on that and wiggle that off like so. Use a 10mm socket to loosen the anchoring bolt here for that coil. Remove that bolt, set it aside as we'll be reusing that. Grab that coil, gently twist and pull up at the same time. And there is your coil right there. Now I want to go ahead and remove this part of the harness from the metal bracket. So if you use a little pocket mirror or something like that, you can actually see there's a little tab on the back side where you can use a pick and push in on the back side. Use a pair of pliers here. Don't grab the big open section here. You want to grab further back where it's a little bit more durable. Just grab that, and while you're pushing on that tab, just wiggle this. There we go. And just use the screwdriver here up against the edge of the valve cover. Just gently pushed out evenly. That's going to release that harness all together there. Pop that off to the side. At this point here, we're ready to go ahead and remove the other 2 coils. Now on our valve cover, we have 2 vacuum ports. We have one right over here. use our hose pliers, makes this super easy. Gently grab that, twist it, and pull. Never bend it because you don't want to break this here in the valve cover. On the back side here, we have a hose clamp. Slide that clamp back a little bit. Use your hose pliers, grab that, twist and push. Pop that off. And yes, we did already disconnect the other side, but it's easier just to pop that off. You don't have to remove that completely. We have our fuel injector harness, and there are two little tabs here that secure this to the brackets. So we're going to use our pliers and just pinch the little tabs on the other side. And it's going to allow us to pull this out. Do the same on the back. Carefully pinch those, pull that harness through. Now we can go ahead and move this up and out of the way, giving us better access to the bolts securing our valve cover. Now, in order to gain access to our valve cover bolts, the hardest one is going to be down between this bracket and the corner of the valve cover. We're going to have to use a small swivel head on our 3/8 socket and extension to get down inside there. And you're going to follow up around the perimeter. There is a few across the top, coming across here, and there's going to be a couple in the back lower corner back here, and then right across the lower portion here. So 10mm socket, and that should give us access to all of these units to loosen and remove. Short extension, swivel on that 10 for this lower back bolt. Now with all of our bolts loose, we should be able to go ahead and gently lift up on this. I'm just going to gently wiggle this here with the pry bar. I'm just trying to break the seal free. This valve cover's been on for quite a while now. Now the bolts themselves, they may stick into the rubber grommet when we pop that back portion of the valve cover. Well, we dropped a couple out. If you want to, go ahead and pull out your bolts. Once you have all these out, we'll go ahead and just put those on the cart. So to pull this up, I did go ahead and just bend that little tab over. We can bend it right back afterwards, but that's going to allow us to go ahead and pull up on this valve cover and remove it from the vehicle. You can see our valve cover gasket peeling off as we do so. Totally fine. Good, pull that off. Next step we want to do is clean up around the perimeter of our cylinder head. While doing this, we want to prevent debris from falling inside here. So as you're wiping, wipe away from the inside portion of the camshafts. So wiping up and away. And we're gonna do this all the way around the perimeter. Now doing this, you can use a rag with some spray solvent. The spray solvent will help tremendously. Clean this up and work your way all the way around the perimeter. You wanna make sure that the gasket surface is clean. Free of oils and debris. Now once you're done cleaning around the perimeter where the gasket goes, in this corner right here and on the lower corner, you might find a little blob of RTV or gasket sealant. What I'm gonna do is you wanna go ahead and use, I'm gonna use a razor blade. You wanna be super careful. You don't wanna gouge the aluminum, but go flat and what you wanna do is clean that residual RTV in here. So by using the blade, you can actually cut around the perimeter, loosening up that stuff there. And you want to get rid of that. I want to make sure that this surface is clean. We're going to do the same thing for the lower portion, and then what we'll do is use a little bit of the spray solvent on a rag, and we're going to clean up those corners again. And it was important that you get these corners clean because we do need to apply a little dab of RTV in this corner here as well as the lower one. Now here we have our valve cover flipped upside down. We have our gasket. Go ahead and pull this out the rest of the way. Go ahead and just toss that off to the side because we're not using it anymore. Now that we've gotten rid of the perimeter gasket, we want to go ahead and clean this. So I'm just going to use a towel here, use some spray solvent. Spray this, and I'm just going to use my screwdriver, and I like to do this. Not necessary for you. You might find another way to do it, but packing that in there, just kind of running around, clean up any debris or residual oil that might be in there. Just go around the perimeter. You can double up. You're going to take the new gasket and first off identify what side is going to go into the valve cover. So we have an upper lip, and then we have the thinner section, which is going to fit into the valve cover. It has like these little ribs on them facing downward. The next is to identify how it goes in, because there are different angles everywhere. This is fairly easy. This has a little square end over here, and that's going to fit in over here. And start working this in, pressing this around. And it'll pretty much line up as you go around the corners, the grooves. It's all molded. Super, super easy. Press that in all the way. And just go back around, make sure that is fully seated. Now that we have our main seal pressed on, if you have them, it's always ideal at this point here to go ahead and replace your upper spark plug tube seals as well. We don't need them. Ours are pretty dry and have worn very well. So at this point, we're just going to replace our seal that was leaking. Let's go ahead and reinstall our valve cover. Now what we're going to do before we install our valve cover with the new gasket, this corner right here where the flat portion meets the curve here for the cam area, right in that crevice, and then there's one down below. What we're going to do is take some RTV. This is some gasket maker RTV. We have, I don't know, maybe about a dime size on our glove here. And what you want to do is put it right into that corner. Just like that. We're going to do the same there. And then we're going to do the same down on the lower corner down here. Now with that RTV set there, that's going to seal up that corner of that crevice there. Perfect. Let's go ahead and get our valve cover set up and ready to lower in. Now we can go ahead and install our valve cover. When doing this, you want to make sure that you don't knock the gasket out of the cover, as that can end up leaking after you've assembled everything, and that's just going to be a huge headache. Now once you get the valve cover lined up, you want to push the valve cover down on top of your spark plug tube seals. With this in place, the next thing that I like to do is go ahead and grab that valve cover and just try to rock it back and forth. If the valve cover starts to rock, then that means that your gasket popped off somewhere and it's not letting it sit flush. But if you wiggle that and that vehicle is shaking with you, we are good, we're seated. Our spark plug tube seals are lined up. Let's go ahead and start to install the bolts around the perimeter of our valve cover. Now I went ahead and I cleaned up the bolts and the sleeves here, so they should drop in nice and easy. I'm going to get a couple of the upper bolts started. That's going to help line everything up nice. Just going to continue this process till I get them all started, and then we'll go ahead and use our extension and ratchet and snug them down gently, and then we'll come back and torque them down to wrap that up. Now we're gently going to snug these all down. There is a particular torque sequence, so do not tighten these, just gently snug them down. Now when torquing these here, you wanted to go around this particular pattern of what we need to torque these in. It's going to be 17 inch-pounds the first time round, then we're going to repeat this and go to 74 inch-pounds. All right, now that we've done the initial torquing to 17 inch-pounds, we're going to repeat the same process to 74 inch-pounds. There we go. Finish up with our torquing. Go ahead and grab your injector harness. I'm going to pop these little retainer buttons back in here. Go ahead and install the vacuum hose. And we have the one in the back here. And this runs up to our intake. But we have this one here that needs to pop on. So work that into place. Bring your harness on over. Slide that onto the bracket. Grab that connector. Press it on. You're going to hear it and feel it snap into place. Take our rear coil here. Drop this down. Push that down. Grab the second one. We're just going to repeat this right through. Gently snug down these 10mm bolts. Press on your connectors. You're gonna hear them and feel them snap into place. Go ahead and push this harness tab on to the bracket. Now before we install our intake here, carefully remove our towels or rags. We're going to use some spray solvent on a rag, clean rag that is. And what we want to do is clean the perimeter here. Wipe away from the holes. Don't want to drop any debris down inside, but what we do want is a clean mating surface for our new gaskets. Repeat this process for all of these ports. Let's go ahead and bring our intake down, and we're not going to install it yet on the intake because we have a vacuum hose on the back side we need to get installed. So you want to go ahead and position this. Again, bring this vacuum hose over. Push that on. Don't forget to move the hose clamp. Okay. Now with that back hose installed, you want to go ahead and maneuver this over. There were two studs on top of the lower portion of the intake, which are going to line up with the holes on the intake over there. So we just want to position this and work this over. Now you're just going to be watching for hoses and electrical connectors and all that fun stuff. Go ahead and slide that intake down. Make sure nothing is bound up. Let's go ahead and install the 2 nuts on the studs. Drop these down inside. I'm going to gently snug those down. We're now going to go ahead and torque down our upper intake bolts and nuts here. Just follow along with the direction on this here. And this is going to 8 foot-pounds. This is a specific pattern. And if you want to go ahead and repeat that one more time, just to double check everything, make sure that everything is evenly torqued, 8 foot-pounds once again. Once you're done with that, we'll go ahead and move on. And on the back of the intake, you want to go ahead and bring that bracket up. Get this positioned on the top here. We have our 2 10mm bolts. Once we get those started, let's go ahead and snug those down. Once those bottom out, you're pretty good with that. You don't have to over tighten them because you're just tightening that bracket down to a plastic intake. Go ahead and take your wiring harness, push those little tabs back and through to secure that in place. On the back passenger side of the intake, we have our vacuum hose. Go ahead and push that onto the intake. Move that clamp over and into place. Further back here, there's just a little plastic retainer clip on the intake. Go ahead and pop that vacuum hose into that. Go ahead and install the 2 12mm bolts from the bracket to the front lower passenger side of the intake. And once you get these started, we'll go ahead and tighten those down. Once that bottoms out, just give it a hair bit more. Doesn't have to be super tight. You're securing a metal bracket to a plastic intake, so do not over tighten those. Install the 2 lower coolant hoses on the throttle body. Once you have those bottomed out, we'll just go ahead and get those clamps moved into position. Install our upper tube here. Tuck that in across the back, Move our clamp down. And remove our bolt here. Do the same for this one here. Let's go ahead and snug these down. Once this bottoms out, just give it a little bit more. Let's go ahead and tighten down that rearward bolt. Bring over the electrical connector. We'll plug this in. Go ahead and connect the throttle body here. Install our air intake ports here and slide these into place. And on the back, we do have our 10mm bolts. I want to go ahead and start those in. Once you get those bolts started, we'll go ahead and tighten those down. Just snug those down until they bottom out. Now over here, we have our vacuum hose. Go ahead and pop this on. Use your pliers to go ahead and move that clamp over. Tighten down our hose clamps. We have two of them, one here and one over by the throttle body. Snug those down. Do the same for this one. Now we can go ahead and line up this upper cover. Snug those down, and then the back side, just bump this down. There it is. Install the ground terminal and tighten down the nut here. Now at this point here, once we have this all assembled, you want to go ahead and clear any codes if you have any on the inside of the vehicle. Go ahead and start it up, take it for road test, and at that point there, it should be all set.
When only the best will do, demand TRQ. The only company that lets you view before you do. TRQ is committed to offering the highest quality aftermarket auto parts that are engineered for peace of mind. Thanks for using and viewing with TRQ.